Imagine you've been shivering for 48 hours straight. Your last meal was a handful of frozen lichen 3 days ago, and the tiny fire in your cave just sputtered and died. In the modern world, winter is a vibe. It's snowy walks, oversized sweaters, and hot cocoa. But 30,000 years ago, winter wasn't a season. It was a predator that hunted entire families. And to stay alive until sunrise, you were about to do something so dark, so biologically wrong, that your modern brain would call it a nightmare. You aren't just cold, you're desperate. You are currently looking at a freshly killed bison, and you aren't thinking about a steak. You're looking at it as a thermal furnace. You are about to reach into its chest cavity with your bare hands, not for food, but for the only heat source left on the frozen tundra. In this deep dive into the secret lives of ancient humans, we aren't exploring the heroic side of our history. We're looking at the shadows. We're uncovering the brutal, visceral methods our ancestors used to cheat death when the sun disappeared for months. We're exploring the hibernation glitch that turned humans into stone-cold sleepers, the macabre architecture of living inside a graveyard of mammoth bones, and the ultimate caloric taboo that saved our species from extinction. Today we're asking, what were the darkest survival methods used by ancient humans during the winter? The biological glitch, the hibernation hypothesis. To understand how our ancestors survived months of sub-zero temperatures with no food, we have to look at a weird historical detail that science is only just beginning to uncover. In a cave in Atapuerca, Spain, archaeologists found thousands of bones from a species of early humans. When they analyzed those bones, they found something shocking. The bones showed signs of seasonal growth disruptions, identical to the bones of hibernating bears. There is a growing theory that ancient humans may have had the biological switch to enter a state of torpor, a kind of prehistoric hibernation. Imagine your tribe finding a deep limestone cave, lining it with dry grass, and then simply turning off. They would slow their heart rates to a crawl, they would drop their body temperatures, they would huddle together in a massive pile of fur and skin, using collective body heat to stay just 1 degree above death. But this wasn't a peaceful sleep, it was a biological gamble. If you didn't have enough body fat stored up from the autumn, your heart would simply stop mid-winter. You wouldn't wake up in the spring. You would become the insulation for the people still sleeping next to you. In the darkest winters, the living literally slept on top of the dead to stay warm. The mammoth architecture living in the grave. On the open plains of the Eurasian steppe, there were no caves, there were no trees for firewood. There was only the wind and the bone-chilling cold. So, our ancestors built houses out of the only thing the landscape provided, the dead. In places like Magiric, researchers have found bone huts. These were massive structures built from the remains of woolly mammoths. Imagine a house where the foundation is made of 90 mammoth jaws, the walls are built from hundreds of ribs, and the roof is draped with heavy, frozen mammoth hides. But here's the dark detail. To keep these houses warm, they couldn't just use wood, because there was none. Instead, they burned bone fires. They would take dry animal bones, smash them to release the marrow, and burn the fat-rich interior. The smell would have been thick, greasy, and acrid. You would spend 3 months trapped inside a house of bone, breathing the smoke of burning skeletons, surrounded by the skulls of the animals you killed to survive. It was a macabre, claustrophobic existence where life was only possible because you were literally living inside a graveyard. The Tauntaun strategy, internal heat. If you were caught in a sudden blizzard far from your bone hut, your options were to die in 30 minutes or find a furnace. The only furnace available was the internal body temperature of a large animal. When an animal is killed, its core temperature stays high for hours. In the most desperate situations, hunters would eviscerate a large kill, a reindeer or a bison, and literally crawl inside the warm carcass to wait out the storm. Think about the sensory reality of that. You are huddled inside the ribcage of a dead animal, the blood soaking into your fur pelt, and the smell of raw organs filling your nose. It is the definition of dark survival. You are using the literal life force of another creature as a biological sleeping bag. But it wasn't just about the heat. They would drink the warm blood to prevent dehydration, as water sources were often frozen solid. It was a brutal, visceral relationship with nature. To keep your story going, you had to become part of the animal's end. The caloric choice, the darkest meal. We cannot talk about dark survival without addressing the most taboo topic in human history, nutritional cannibalism. In the modern world, we see cannibalism as an act of monsters. But 15,000 years ago, in the grip of a generational blizzard, it was often a calculated, heart-wrenching decision of survival. When the herds were gone and the hibernation failed, the tribe faced a choice. If the elders or the sick passed away during the night, their bodies were a source of high-quality protein and fat that could save the rest of the children. We see evidence of this in the archaeological record. bones with defleshing marks that are identical to the marks found on deer bones. This wasn't ritualistic, it was a desperate attempt to keep the flame of the tribe alive. Imagine the psychological weight of that. You are eating the very person who taught you how to hunt, not out of malice, but because they are the only reason you will see the spring. It is the ultimate secret life detail, the idea that our survival as a species was sometimes paid for with the literal bodies of those we loved. The social cost, the winter of the soul. Surviving the winter wasn't just about calories and heat. It was about the mind. Imagine being trapped in a bone hut for months with 20 people. The air is thick with smoke, everyone is starving, and the darkness outside is absolute. Psychologically, this was the winter of the soul. Without the constant movement of the hunt, ancient humans were forced into deep, prolonged social contact. This likely shaped our storytelling, our spirituality, and our internal lives. They would tell stories to fill the silence. They would create art, as we've seen in caves across the world, to remind themselves that the world outside still existed. This isolation made us who we are. It forced us to look inward and find meaning in the darkness. The power of the spring. So, what can we learn from the darkest survival methods of our ancestors? We often think of ancient humans as primitive, but their resilience was superhuman. They lived through conditions that would break a modern civilization in a week. They slept in graveyards, they burned bone for warmth, and they crawled into carcasses to stay alive. They did these things because they understood a truth we often forget. Life is precious, and it is worth any price. The fact that you are sitting here today is proof that their dark methods worked. You are the descendant of the people who refused to let the winter win. You carry the DNA of the survivors who saw the white silence of the Ice Age and decided that their story wasn't over yet. The next time you feel a chill in the air and turn up your thermostat, take a second to remember Grog and his tribe. They didn't have a dial, they only had their will to survive. Human blueprint, and this is why you are history.